Okay. Greek mythology are all about stories. These stories are told from generation to generation. Each one are about gods, goddesses, demigods, titans, creatures, giants, and rituals. These stories have often taught um, um, lots of morals. Some of these morals were the importance of bravery, intelligence, fear, love, fun, and the difference between right and wrong. The origin. It all started with a complete blanket of darkness, nothingness. Then Gaia and Uranus were created. Gaia is the earth goddess, and Uranus was the sky goddess. They had 12 children, the Titans. Then two of the Titans, Rhea and Kronos, had 6 children, 5 of which are Olympians: Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, and Demeter. And then the goddess Athena was born from the thoughts of Zeus. Zeus and Leto had 2 children, Artemis and Apollo. And then Zeus and Hera had Ares. After getting mad at Zeus for having a child with someone else, Hera found a way to have a child all by herself. The result of that was Hephaestus. Fun fact: when Hera saw Hephaestus, she thought he was so ugly that the instant she saw him, she threw him off Olympus. Then Zeus and Maya had Hermes. Then Aphrodite came crawling out of the seas. Fun fact behind that: Uranus was actually Aphrodite came out of the bubbling foam of where Kronos chopped Uranus' head off. So Gaia organized this little dinner thing for Uranus, and when Uranus came down, they all 5 of their children ambushed him, and Kronos chopped Uranus' head off into the ocean. So Aphrodite came crawling out of the sea where Uranus' head lay. After that, Zeus had a baby with Immortal, and they had a demigod, and his name was Dionysus. And he created wine, so he was promoted to be a god. And that is how all 12 Olympians and Hades came to be. Zeus. Zeus is the god of the sky. He is the king of all Olympians. He and his brother Poseidon and Hades are the big 3. They are like the strongest gods ever. And fun fact, they each came to be so when they defeated the Titans, they rolled a die, and whoever rolled the highest got to pick which territory they wanted. So first, Zeus rolled the highest, so he picked the sky. Then Poseidon rolled second, he picked the sea. Then, even though Hades seemed super creepy, originally he didn't want the underworld. He just rolled last, so he had to pick that. Poseidon's the god of the ocean. He has 2 brothers, Hades and Zeus. Together they're strongest. And I'm not sure if this is part of Greek mythology or if this was made up, but one of his more relevant sons is Percy Jackson. That's a really good book series about him. You should go read it. Then Hades, the god of the underworld. Even though he seems super creepy right now in the beginning, he was actually a really nice guy, and he didn't want to be the god of the underworld, but he kind of ended up with it. And a fun fact about all 3 of the big 3, they all made an oath. They swear to never have children because all their demigod children were kind of getting super strong and out of hand. But 2 of Hades' children got trapped in this hotel where when you're in there, it just seems like a few months, but actually it's like a couple decades. So when they came out, they had already made the oath, but before, when they went into the hotel, the oath was not made, so that caused a lot of chaos. Next is Hera. Hera is the goddess of marriage. She's one of the 6 gods, including Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, and Demeter. Zeus, actually, fun fact about all six of them, the first five, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera, were each and all swallowed by their father Kronos, because when Kronos was coming back home from a trip, he heard one of his prophecies said that he would get killed by one of his children, so he swallowed all his children. In the end, Rhea, when they had the last children, Zeus gave him a rock to swallow instead of Zeus. So she waited until Zeus was 14. Then Zeus came and defeated his father Kronos and saved all of his brothers and sisters. So, and also Hera has made an oath to have children with no one else but Zeus. Next is Demetri. She's the goddess of agriculture. She is one of the first six gods. Again, she's very lonely and isn't very popular. She spends most of her time in the underworld because her daughter is married to Hades, the god of the underworld. Athena is the goddess of knowledge. She was born from the thoughts of her father Zeus, the god of the sky. All of her children are born from her thoughts and of the father and herself. She has sworn maidenship, so she has no husband, and Zeus considered her to be his favorite child, Apollo. Apollo is the god of the sun, but he is also the god of music and poetry. He has a twin sister, Artemis, the goddess of the moon. He likes to ride around on a sun chariot, which he got from Helios, and he likes to boast and brag a lot. Artemis is the goddess of the hunt and the moon. She has sworn maidenship, and she has a group of girl hunters that have also sworn maidenship in exchange to being immortal. They can only die in battle. She always makes sure she doesn't kill too many animals, so she always has enough to go hunting again, and there's a balance in the world. Ares is the god of war. He likes to pick fights with almost anybody except the big three. He also likes to boast and brag, but another thing, he's really, 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 really competitive. So any of his children who lose a competition always get a good scolding from him. Hephaestus is the god of blacksmiths. He was born because Hera got mad at Zeus for having a baby with someone else, so she found a way to have Hephaestus all by herself. When he was born, he was so ugly that his mother threw him off Olympus. So 14 years after he grew up with mortals, he came back and built nice leather chairs for everybody with all the Olympians, and all of them were super nice except one, which was Hera's, and when she hopped on, it chained Hera to the chair. Aphrodite is the goddess of love. Some myths say that Aphrodite has no mother and her father is Kronos because she appeared out of the bubbling foam of where Kronos chopped Uranus' head off. Others say her parents are Zeus and Dione, the early earth and mother goddess. Hermes is the god of messengers. All travelers always pray to Hermes before going on trips or traveling. He's the guide to the underworld, and he guides all dead or lost souls to the underworld. Hermes invented an instrument called a lyre, actually out of the tendons and hollow bones of a turtle, which he traded to Apollo. Dionysus is the god of grapes and wine. He was originally a demigod, but he got promoted up to god because he invented wine. He is a son of Zeus, his godly father. Then once he became a god, Dionysus could turn himself into any animal he wished to be. Conclusion. Each god, goddess, and children and their children each have their own unique talent and own quality, which always shine through in these stories. Each one have good talents, such as Poseidon is very, very brave, and Athena is very, very smart. So when the parents tell these stories to children, the children try to be like the gods. Each god has their own principles they live by that are passed down to their children and are shown in many stories, which also the parents want the children to follow. Thank you for listening.
That was very good, Ramu.
Here it's here. Yeah, I got it. Good job, Ramu.
Thank you
The
again.
colors were beautiful, right? Hello, Ramna.
Hello, Priya. Sorry, I was on the Zoom, Google Meet. I was waiting. I don't know why.
No problem.
Sorry.
No problem. So, Ramu, the colors were so beautiful. Do they have anything to do with the characters or the?
Actually, yeah. So, see, for example, Poseidon, he's the god of the sea, so I put blue in his background. And he's the god of the sky and lightning, so I put
wow, nice. They were all different colors, very bright, very nice. Nice color choice.
Yeah, each one had a color that represented him the most.
Kana, you have a question?
Yeah. So, do you know if Percy Jackson has a real life counterpart or like a Greek mythology counterpart?
I'm not sure. I mean, my mom says it's a story based off of Greek mythology, but I'd argue, because like it wasn't made up in ancient Greek times, but it was written by Rick Riordan, like I don't know, like 10 years ago. So I'd say it's more like a story based off of Greek mythology, not like actually part of it.
Do you know anything?
Do you know about Perseus?
Yeah, Perseus. He's actually a son of Zeus, and the reason behind why Percy Jackson's named Percy is because apparently his mom wanted him to have the same luck that the original Perseus had.
Wow.
Because most demigods always end up like dying some really wretched, horrible way. But Perseus was like one of the only ones who died peacefully.
Oh.
So his mom wanted Perseus to have the same luck.
That's really cool information. I didn't know until you guys started talking about it. Wow. I didn't know. It's all
neither.
Anand, do you have any questions for Ramu?
No.
No, you're all good?
I'm pretty good.
All right. Awesome. Great job, Ramu.
Now I have one small question. So I remember you saying that I don't remember the name of the god. Somebody was a demigod but then got promoted to a god.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, how does that work? I mean, what's the criteria?
So Dionysus was originally demigod, half mortal, half god.
Okay.
But in some cases where he did something so amazing, like Greeks like
Wine.
that wine was so holy,
Okay.
and Dionysus created it, that he was worthy that all gods were restricted by these old witch ladies called Furies to give out the gift of becoming a god to other people. But once in a while, like Percy, when he defeated Kronos, again, like there's a whole new story to that, but eventually Kronos rose again after Zeus defeated him, and Percy defeated him this time. So his father and a bunch of other Olympians agreed that they would allow Percy to become a god, just like Dionysus did.
Got it. So it's some kind of a voting system. So the majority voting. I see. I got it.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's like lots, like more than 3/4 of the council votes.
I see. Wow.
Then demigods can be promoted to gods.
Interesting. Very
All
interesting.
of them have power, but they use it very restrictedly.
That is a cool. Okay, that's cool. That's interesting. Thanks for explaining that, Ramu. I had no idea there was a promotion system from demigods to gods in Greek mythology.
I know. I'm glad you caught that, Ramana. I was like more focused on the colors, the different colors.
Right. But that was interesting. Okay, cool. Thanks, Ramu.
Nice.
Yeah.
Great job.
Thank you. Good
Awesome.
job.
Keep it up.
Good job.
All right.
Okay, I'll present now.
So you can do this in sleep, right, Kanna?
What?
You were so confident. I'm just saying you can do it in the sleep. You were so confident yesterday. I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
Wait, what?
No, you're saying you're very confident now.
You're confident. I'm saying you can do it in your sleep.
No, I didn't say that. I can say I'll present now.
No. He's saying you can present even in your sleep.
In your sleep. I'm just saying you're so
Oh.
confident, and it's
Yeah.
very impressive. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay,
presented
thank
yesterday.
you.
Okay, so now you have to
Is
present.
the screen already shared?
Hmm. Present, right? Okay. Make sure uncle can see.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see. Kanna.
Okay. So hi, I'm Kannan Chukulingam, and this is a presentation on World War I, also known as the Great War. So why did I choose World War I? World War I saw the downfall of multi-ethnic empires such as the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire. It was a story of ethnic injustice and how mistreated certain peoples were. World War I showcased modern technology and weaponry, such as the usage of tanks and biplanes. So outlining my talk. So I'll be talking about when the war started, and what started the war, the Western theater, the Eastern theater, the Armenian genocide, America's entry into the war, the end of the Great War, and a summary. So you may see that I have a Tom and Jerry picture here, which is actually a cool little fun fact because during World War I, the British called the Germans Jerry, and the Germans called the British Tommy. So it may have taken inspiration from that. I don't know, but I think it's cool. So before the war, during this time prior to the war, most countries wanted to expand and conquer land so they could gain an economical boost and gain natural resources. One example of this is Italy. Before the war, Italy was aligned with the Central Powers, but when the Allies promised them these two pieces of land, they instantly swayed to the Allied side. So how did it start? On June 28, 1914, the Austro-Hungarian Archduke Franz Ferdinand went to Sarajevo to quell civil unrest that was in the area. But then when he was there, he and his wife were killed by Serbian assassins. The government suspected the Serbian government to be part of this, and they actually probably were. So what happened was the Austro-Hungarian government sent a list of demands that were pretty much impossible to the Serbian government, and when they were denied by the Serbian government, they declared war on Serbia. So July 28th, 1914 was when that happened. This was the beginning of the Great War. So as you can see, this is Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Sophie, the Duchess of Hohenberg. So at the time, Serbia was allied with the Russian Empire, who was also allied with France. At this time, Great Britain was not involved in the war, but soon they would come to join. Before the war, Austria-Hungary was allied with Germany and consulted them before declaring war. They were also allied with the Ottoman Empire, who is basically, as we know it, modern-day Turkey and most of the Middle East. So most of the fighting in World War I took place at the French border. This was known as the Maginot Line, which was a line of trenches and forts that were near the French border of Germany. Germany's initial plan was to speed through France and conquer it, and then turn around and conquer Russia. They thought they could do this because they didn't have to deal with Britain at this time because Britain wasn't involved in the war. But as you can see, the Maginot Line is very heavily fortified here, as you can see. But along the Belgian border, it's weak. So Germany's plan was to invade Belgium. The Battle of the Lech was the Germany's invasion of Belgium and the first battle. It was August 4th to August 16, 1914. This showed the atrocities that the German forces committed. This is like the burning of the Louvain, August 25th, 1914. The Allies had a lot of propaganda on this, and this had a big influence on the U.S.
So what is that? The burning of the Louvain.
The Louvain is a library. The Western Theater. A theater is a collection of battles in a general area. In this case, it would be the west portion of Europe, the French border, Belgium, and Germany. So from Belgium, the German forces advanced all the way to Paris. At this point, the French couldn't risk moving their capital or getting conquered. So the French commander-in-chief of the French forces, Joseph Joffre, ordered the French forces to stop and defend the city. This was the Battle of the Marne, September 6th to September 10th, 1914. This was a very deadly battle for the French, but they were able to hold Paris. So Russia had now entered the war, and Austria-Hungary launched an invasion into Russia. They came all the way to this green line in Russia, but in the invasion of East Prussia, August 17th to September 14th, 1914, Russia launched all the way to this red line in Austria-Hungary. Up in the north, the Germans were called to the Eastern Front to aid Austria-Hungary. So in the Battle of Tannenberg, August 26th to August 30th, 1914, German forces pushed all the way to this area, which is, as we know it, common-day Lithuania and Latvia. So down south, the Ottoman Empire was arguing whether they should go in the war or not. So the pro-war party went to the Russian territory and fired shells at Russian land. So this basically brought the Ottoman Empire into the war. So their first campaign of World War I was the Caucasus Campaign, October 29th, 1914. This was an invasion into Russia through the Caucasus Mountains. This was unsuccessful because most Ottoman troops froze to death due to the freezing weather conditions of the Caucasus. This was much different than the deserts of the Ottoman Empire. So as you can see, these are the three areas in which they invade the Caucasus. This is modern-day Georgia and Armenia. So the Ottoman Empire, it also tried to invade the British-held Suez Canal on February 4th, 1915, but they failed to do so. So under the Young Turk government, the Ottomans blamed these losses on the ethnic Armenian people who lived in that area. These people had been facing oppression for the past few years, and it all came to this, which led to the killing and deportation of 600,000 and 1.5 million Armenians dead and others forcefully deported from the country. This is a picture of refugees, refugees like fleeing from Ottoman territory. So Britain found itself aligned against the Ottoman Empire because they wanted the land, which was rich in oil and wealth. So their first operation in Ottoman territory was the Gallipoli invasion of February 17th to January 9th, 1916. This is a British landing on the Ottoman Dardanelles of Turkey. This was carried out by mostly Australian and Indian troops, in fact. So after a year of fighting, the British had to retreat. At that time, both India and Australia were under British rule. So the Arab revolts. The British also launched offensives from the south of Ottoman territory. These were unsuccessful because British armies kept on getting captured by Ottoman forces. So one British general, T.E. Lawrence, convinced the native Arab tribes in the Ottoman Empire to rise up against the Ottomans and lead attacks on the Ottoman supply line. This is like trains carrying resources which would supply the Ottoman front lines. So this is Lawrence of Arabia, not the one from the movie. So Verdun and the Somme. It's 1916, and the German forces advanced to the city of Verdun, which is a big strategic French city. And if they lost the city, the Germans would be able to get the rest of France. So the French desperately defended the city in the Battle of Verdun, February 21st to December 18, 1916. So the French needed aid, so they called for a plea of help, and in response, the British created their own battle known as the Battle of the Somme, July 1st to November 18th, 1916. To this day, the Battle of the Somme is the most deadliest battle in British history. So these are the two. So in the Battle of the Somme, the British launched a brand new type of war machine known as the tank, which is at that time known as the British Landship. And also, both sides took part in chemical warfare, mainly the use of mustard gas. Most people affiliate the Germans with chemical weapons, but to be fair, both sides took part. During this time, the only naval battle of the war took place, which was the Battle of Jutland, which took place sometime north of Denmark. So this was May 31st, 1916 to June 1st, 1916. This battle showcased the brand new type of warship known as the Dreadnought. You can see its relevance to modern battleships and inspired most of the coming battleships. All countries used biplanes for their air force. One very famous one was the Ilya Muromets, which was a Russian-made bomber, which most countries used. India's involvement in the war. In World War I, many Indian Gurkhas were shipped from British India to fight in the front lines of the British front of World War I. As you can see, this is the 1st Gurkha regiment of the British Army. Many Indians were also sent to Mesopotamia, or current-day Iraq, and Persia, current-day Iran, to fight against the Ottomans. The Battle of Haifa in 1918 in Israel displayed India's military prowess, with many Lancer cavalry units making Ottomans retreat. So, the Russian revolutions. In response to the French plea of help in the Battle of Verdun, the Russians launched their own offensive, known as the Brusilov Offensive, deep into Austro-Hungarian territory. At this point, almost every country is running out of lots of resources, and the first of them to completely fall was Russia, who was running out of resources. And the whole country was starving due to the focus of war, and most soldiers didn't have guns. So due to this, there was major civil unrest, and there were uprisings in Petrograd, which turned into a violent overthrow of the Tsar, which was headed by a man named Vladimir Lenin, who is known as the father of Russian communism. So this is the Russian Revolution of March 8, 1917 to June 16, 1923. So once the new communist government took over, they pulled Russia out of the Great War to aid the economy in its dying stage. So the Allies needed a fresh country to participate in the war, or else they would lose. So at this time, the U.S. was the main supplier of resources for the Allies. So to Germany, the U.S. was becoming a very big threat if it entered the war. So they needed to get a surprise on it. So Germany sent a telegram to Mexico asking them if they could attack America. This never reached Mexico, and it was actually intercepted by British forces, who showed this to America. So this inclined them to officially enter the war on April 6, 1917. These American soldiers in the front lines were known as doughboys. So the end of the Great War. With Americans shipping to the front lines of the Western Front, the Allies were getting stronger and stronger, and Germany tried to break this Allied line multiple times in the Maginot Line, but failed. The Allies were able to get stronger with every hit, and were almost able to repel the last hits. So on November 11th, 1918, Germany was the last of the Central Powers to surrender. So the Treaty of Versailles. So the Treaty of Versailles said that Germany had to demilitarize the Rhineland, which was the area near the French border. It had to pay $33 million in USD in war reparations, and reduce the size of Germany's army to like a 30th of what it was. Took away Germany's air force, and Germany had to give up part of its land, thus creating Poland. So the Treaty of Versailles was one of the main causes of World War II, and Germany was in very bad economic state due to the Treaty of Versailles and how much it had to pay, so that the German currency became almost worthless. So in like the maybe 30s, America it gave Germany a very big loan, but because of the Great Depression, America wanted that loan back very immediately, and Germany couldn't do that. So all of this economic stress, is what caused World War II, along with Hitler's hatred for the Allies, as well as most of the country's hatred for the Allies, because of how much this reduced Germany. So So this is Austria-Hungary before and after, and Germany before and after World War I. So as you can see before, they're very big countries, but after Germany lost most of its conquered land, which is most of this area, which turned into their own independent countries, which would be Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. And Germany, Hitler, who was actually a soldier in World War One and grew extremely patriotic to Germany, hated this area known as the Polish Corridor because of how it split the German land in half. Because this is also part of Germany. I'm not sure why this happened, but that's how they split the land. Austria-Hungary got divided into Austria-Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and Romania also gained some land because Romania already existed during this time. And most of these countries got inherited into Yugoslavia. And you can see the newly formed USSR lost most of its western land here, which would be the creation of these new countries. So the Ottoman Empire also had to split into major countries and lose a lot of land. So Turkey, Lebanon, Kuwait, they all gained independency from the Ottoman Empire. Saudi Arabia and Iran were almost always independent, but Palestine, which is basically current-day Israel, Syria and Mesopotamia were split between the British and the French. So to summarize, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand, the World War I begins, Battle of the Ledge, invasion of East Prussia, all of these battles. The Battle of the Somme, the Russian Revolution, America's entry to the war, and on November 11th, 1918, the World War I ends. Takeaways. At the end of the war, 17 million were killed and 20 million men were wounded in combat. A lot of sacrifices had to be made to protect the human rights of every individual. World War I saw the formation of smaller countries from multi-ethnic empires such as Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. This allowed many individuals from oppressed ethnicities to gain freedom from their oppressors. Thank you for the opportunity, all listeners, Dad, Mom, Anna, and Ramna uncle, and their co-speakers and their parents. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, fantastic job, Kanna.
Thank
Very,
you.
very impressive. I'm super impressed with your grasp on, or your hold on the subject matter here. It's just phenomenal. Um, so, are you particularly interested in world wars, or are you interested in history in general? I'm just curious.
I like most of the stuff that happened during the 20th century, like the Cold War and both of the World Wars. Those are very interesting topics to me.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Just one question. So, I mean, this all started because the Serbian assassins killed the Austrian Ferdinand, right? So, why did they even kill him in the first place? What was the motivation?
Because there was a lot of hatred towards the Austria-Hungarians because Austria-Hungary is a very big multi-ethnic empire, and most of those ethnicities, like they wanted freedom, they really wanted freedom, and this grew toward they had a big hatred toward the government, and that's pretty much what led to that.
I see. So it's basically at the core, it's actually an ethnic conflict.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. And why did Germany have to attack France through Belgium? I mean, I understand that those borders were weak, but what was their motivation to attack France in the first place?
Because France was their bordering ally. They was the most accessible out of all of the allies to attack.
Okay, so they were just easy target basically.
Yeah.
That's all. Okay, got it. Okay, did you know that World War I had a big impact on Indian freedom movement?
I feel like didn't World War II do a better job of that because Britain was in such a weak state?
Yeah, so basically the World War II was actually the last coffin, right? I mean, last nail on the coffin. Britain was already very, very weak. So by then the Indian freedom movement had already picked up so much steam and it was already very strong. So it made it was very obvious that the the independence was going to happen at any year. But the 1914, that 1918 period is very critical because what happened was, like you said, Indians did participate in the World War One to fight for the British on the Britain side. The hope was after the war, Britain was going to give the Indians the dominion status, which means the control to rule their land and have some kind of autonomy. But right after the war, Britain did not keep up the word. So at that point, Gandhi and all the other folks who were part of the independent movement decided that it's high time that they make their freedom movement a lot more stronger and make it like they took it very seriously. In other words, the World War One, the betrayal by the British to honor their word, caused the Indian freedom movement, freedom fighters to take the matters in their own hand. They basically lost trust that actually the Britain is going to keep up their word. In other words, they were not going to give back India. So then Gandhi had to come up with a different plan to actually raise, like the civil disobedience movement, the non-cooperation, all the ahimsa, all that stuff happened because Indians participated in World War One and they were not rewarded. Even today, I don't think in England um, the Indian contribution as recognized as it should be. All the reparations, nothing of that sort really happened for India. They never really paid anything back. It's sad.
Yeah.
Wow, great points, Ramna.
Yeah.
I think, they all come together, right? The entire.
Yeah, the whole world history, it's all intertwined.
Mm,
Had Indians not participated in World War One, I don't think we would have been so motivated to fight the British because
yeah,
we were so weak.
right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad. Thanks for bringing up that point, role of India in World War One, and so that was really very. And now you also give the reason how it's connected to even India's revolution and all that, and India's fight and to get freedom. Yeah,
right.
it all makes sense.
Yeah, I know. All the 20th century events are very, very fascinating. It's just
Yeah,
the world really became very, very connected in the 20th
right.
century.
Yeah.
And
Good.
like Kanna said, the World War Two, even though it was very, very bad, at least for India, it kind of worked in India's favor because the
Yeah,
people were in no position to run the country from
yeah,
England because they were
yeah.
completely bankrupt after World War Two.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Awesome.
good job, fantastic job,
Yeah.
Kanna.
Yeah. Thank you.
Keep it up.
That was good. That was really good. So, Anand, are you all ready to start? Anand?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Good. Go ahead. We'll
Oh.
mute and you go ahead, please.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Okay, let me share screen then. Okay. Yeah, so World War II. Well, World War II first started in the aftermath of World War One, and it it was the European nations were devastated in after World War One, and so in the conference made afterwards, the United Nations had created the Treaty of Versailles, where they placed all the blame on Germany and forced them to pay for the war reparations. And due to this made Germany uh, this made Germany go into a state of both political and economic instability, and this would later lead to the creation of the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler's rise to power. So Hitler climbed up the ranks very quickly. By 1933, he became the Chancellor of Germany, and in the following year, he became the supreme leader of Germany. So he had like all the power. And once he became the leader, he violated the Treaty of Versailles, and he began to secretly rearm the soldiers in Germany to prepare for attacking the other countries. And then 4 years later, in 1938, Hitler signed strategic treaties with both Japan and Italy, and he also sent troops to occupy Austria. And then in 1939, he attacked and took over Czechoslovakia. And since the US and Soviet Union were already dealing with their own internal conflicts, and since both Britain and France were reluctant to confront Germany, there was really no country at the time that was available or willing to put a stop to Germany and prevent them from getting any further. World War II started when Hitler had invaded Poland, but before Hitler would invade Poland, he signed the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact with the Soviet leader Joseph Stalin in late August 1939. This would mean that Hitler would not have to deal with a war on two sides as he invaded Poland. It also meant that the Soviets would be assisting Hitler in conquering Poland. And then on September 1st of 1939, Hitler invaded Poland and hit them from the west. Hitler already knew that Poland was in an alliance with both France and Great Britain, and he was fully prepared for the consequences. And so 2 days later, on September 3rd of 1939, both France and Great Britain declared war on Germany, which would start World War II. Now, the main reason for why Hitler would attack Poland is because he believed that Poland betrayed them in World War One, and Hitler was actually a soldier in World War One, and he was very patriotic. So he thought that Poland had betrayed him, so that's why he attacked Poland first. 2 weeks later, on September 17th, the Soviet troops would invade Poland from the east. And since Poland was being hit from both the east and the west by the Soviets and the Nazis, Poland fell very quickly. And so control of the nation was divided between the Nazis and the Soviets, as per the terms in the Non-Aggression Pact signed by both Hitler and Stalin. Later, Stalin would send his army to take control of the Baltic states, which was composed of Lithuania, Estonia, and Latvia at the time. And after taking control of the Baltic states, he would also defeat Finland in the Russia-Finland War. Also, at the same time, the German Navy was facing off with the British Navy at sea. And the U-boat submarines from the Germans sank over 100 merchant ships in the first 4 months of World War II. And then on April 9th, 1940, Germany would take control of Denmark and Norway simultaneously in a simultaneous invasion. And on an event known as Blitzkrieg on May 10th, German forces swept through both the Netherlands and Belgium, destroying everything in their path. 3 days later, the Nazis would cross the Meuse River and hit French forces at Sedan. And Sedan at the time was considered to be an impenetrable defensive barrier, but the Nazis managed to break through and hit them through the use of tanks and planes. So this is a picture of the Nazi and Soviet soldiers at the invasion of Poland. Here they are. And Italy, and as France was on the verge of falling and being defeated, the fascist dictator of Italy, Benito Mussolini, would ally with Hitler through a pact named the Pact of Steel. And then on June 10th of 1940, Italy would declare war on both France and Great Britain. 4 days later, Germany would enter Paris. This is where the new government, which was formed by World War I hero Marshal Philippe Pétain, would request an armistice 2 days after Germany had entered. This would lead to France being divided into two zones, one that was under the control of Germany and the other that was controlled by Pétain's government. And so since Germans have just defeated France, Hitler would now refocus all of his strength and attention to defeating Britain. But this proved to be more difficult because the English Channel provided a defensive advantage to Britain and made it more difficult for the Nazis to attack Britain. In an event known as the Blitz, German planes began to bomb Britain from September 1940 all the way up until May 1941. The Blitz would also include night raids on industrial centers and Londons, and this would lead to massive civilian casualties and damage. Many people died in the Blitz, and it led to a lot of property damage. In the Battle of Britain, the Royal Air Force defeated the German Air Force, and this caused Hitler to postpone his invasion of Britain. As Britain began to push its defensive resources to the limit, the US lent out a helping hand to Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and so Britain could begin to receive both aid and war supplies from the US. The reason why the US could lend resources to Britain while still maintaining its neutrality was because of the Lend-Lease Act. This act was passed by Congress in 1941 and allowed the US to give war supplies and aid to any nation that the US deemed to be vital to the defense of the United States. And this act, rather than forcing the British or other nations to buy those supplies, instead allowed the US to lend or lease the war supplies to Britain, thus the name, the Lend-Lease Act. So this is a picture of Prime Minister Winston Churchill and US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Yeah, so this is Prime Minister Winston Churchill on the left, and that is FDR on the right, the US President. So in 1941, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria joined the Axis powers. And well, as it's not well known, but they were actually part of the Axis powers at one point, although they weren't as strong as Italy or Japan or Germany. But yeah, they did join the Axis powers in 1941. Then in the April of that same year, German troops would conquer and take control of Yugoslavia and Greece. The real objective behind why the Nazis took over Yugoslavia and Greece was so then Hitler could defeat the Soviet Union and take over the land. He believed that the land and territory gained from invading and controlling the Soviet Union would give Germany the strategic advantage or the Lebensraum it required. On June 22nd, 1941, Hitler commenced the invasion for the Soviet Union, and it was codenamed Operation Barbarossa. Although the Soviets had more tanks and aircraft than the Germans, the aircraft they had was outdated and very weak compared to the ones that Germans had. And so this combined with the surprise invasion from the Germans allowed Germany to get within a 200-mile radius of Moscow by mid-July of that same year. But the next German advance would not commence until October of that same year because Hitler was arguing with his commanders. But when October came around and as Germany was about to begin its next assault, the Soviets launched a successful counteroffensive, and this, as well as an onset of a harsh winter from the incoming winter, forced Germany to push forward its plans of conquering the Soviet Union. The final solution in the Holocaust. So Hitler had another strategy that was specially prepared for the Jews. And this plan was called the final solution. It was where he had planned to eradicate the entire Jewish population in Europe. He introduced these plans at around the same time the Soviets launched a counteroffensive on Germany. And so the final solution, the idea of the final solution was to round up all the Jews in concentration camps that had been established in Europe. The event that would follow the final solution would be called the Holocaust, which would be known as the genocide of the Jews, where they were killed in the concentration camps. The Holocaust killed over 6 million Jews and 11 million others who came from a wide variety of groups. And the Holocaust is mainly and widely known for its genocide of the Jews because it killed about 2/3 of the Jewish population. And the victims of the Holocaust would be sent to the concentration camps in sealed writings. And anyone who survived the journey would then be forced to work in the concentration camps, and they'd be killed in many brutal various ways, like being gassed or beaten or death marches. And this killing would keep on going, and it would continue until the end of World War II in May 1945, or until the defeat of Germany in May of 1945. This is a picture of the Jews boarding the freight train to the concentration camp established by the Soviet Union. I'm not Soviet Union, Germany. So the US would enter the war later. Well, Japan at the time was also in World War II, and it was actually warring with China, and it was gaining a lot of territory. It had seized control over European colonies that had been established in the Far East. And at this point, the only big, powerful nation that wasn't fully engaged in the war was the US. But that would all change on December 7th, 1941. On that date, Pearl Harbor, a major U.S. naval base in Hawaii, was attacked by 360 Japanese aircraft. These Japanese aircraft took the lives of over 2,300 troops in the attack. The main reason for why Japan decided to attack the US is because the US had put trade sanctions on Japan at the time. And due to the events at Pearl Harbor, this would unify the public opinion and cause the US to enter the war. So on December 8, Congress, with only one dissenting vote, declared war on Japan, and so the US had officially entered World War II. Following this declaration of war, Germany and the other Axis powers, Italy and also Japan, would declare war on the US as well. After losing numerous battles to Japan, the US finally won at the Navy Battle of Midway in June 1942. This would prove to be a turning point in the war, as the Allies would begin to have a successful string of victories against the Axis powers and against Japan mainly on Guadalcanal from the August of 1942 to the February of 1943. This is the explosion at Pearl Harbor, which took the lives of over 2,000 American soldiers in Hawaii. So the Allies began to push their way towards victory after the Battle of Midway. As the Allies began to force their way into the mainland of Japan, they were also winning against the Italians and Germans in North Africa during 1943. Following the victory in Africa, the Allies would then invade Italy and Sicily and take down and defeat Mussolini and take down his corrupt government in July of 1943. But despite defeating Italy, the Allies would have to continue to fight the Germans inside of Italy until 1945. And so on the east side, the Soviets had launched a successful counteroffensive in November and finished the Battle of Stalingrad, which was one of the bloodiest and most fiercest battles in World War II. And also due to the oncoming harsh winter, and since they had low medical and food supplies at the time, the Germans over on the Soviet side had surrendered and on January 21st, 1943. The last German offensive of World War II would occur on D-Day, which happened on June 6th of 1944. It was the day the Allies started a huge invasion, landing over 150,000 Allied soldiers on the beach of Normandy, France. Hitler responded by sending whatever was left of his army to the western side of Europe, which would prove to be a fatal move as it would lead to Germany's defeat in May. While the German troops marched into Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Poland, Hitler gathered his last remaining defensive forces in an effort to push and keep the Allies out of Germany in what would be known as the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge lasted from December of 1944 to January of 1945. But with an intense aerial bombing by the Allies on Germany in February of 1945, the Allies would finally defeat Germany. Hitler had already killed himself on April 30th in his war bunker. And following this, 8 days later, Germany would surrender to the Allies. This is a picture of the Allied soldiers landing on the beach of Normandy, France on D-Day as they pushed their way into Germany. So, yeah. And so, with two of the three major Axis powers already defeated, this would leave only Japan left in World War II. US President Truman, Churchill, and Stalin discussed the current war with Japan, along with the peace settlement of Germany during the Potsdam Conference of July to August 1945. Germany would be divided into four sections that would be controlled by France, US, Britain, and the Soviet Union. The one that was controlled by the Soviet Union would be named Poland, and this would lead to a lot of conflict in Germany, but that's another good topic to talk about. And as for the matter of Eastern Europe's future, Churchill and Truman both discussed with Stalin as they needed his help and cooperation in defeating Japan. But since the Allies had sustained heavy casualties in the battles of Okinawa and Iwo Jima as they campaigned their way into mainland Japan, and since President Truman feared losing even more lives in a big land invasion of Japan, he decided he would allow and authorize the use of the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb was developed in the Manhattan Project by some famous scientists. One of them was Bohr, but yeah, and the atomic bomb was a devastating, very powerful weapon. And this weapon was first used on the Japanese city Hiroshima and then again on Nagasaki in August. So both Hiroshima and Nagasaki were bombed in August. And this bomb actually devastated the city and took millions of lives in Japan. And this would force Japan to agree to the terms of the Potsdam Declaration on August 15th. And so, in less than a month, on September 2nd, Japan would send a formal surrender to the US in Tokyo Bay. And with that, World War II had officially ended. And so, this is the division of Germany after their defeat in World War II. So, as you can see, this is where the British took control, this is where France took control, this is where the US took control, and then this is the one that the Soviets took control. This right here is considered to be Berlin, right? So yeah, that has its own history. And so this is a picture of Prime Minister Winston Churchill, right here on the left, US President Harry Truman, here in the middle, and Soviet leader Joseph Stalin, right here on the right. Right, and all three of them were at the Potsdam Conference. This is a picture of all three of them at the Potsdam Conference. So the conclusion of World War II. World War II is one of the bloodiest and most destructive international conflicts in history. It had over 70 million people killed, including the 6 million Jews who had been killed in the Holocaust. About 50 million civilians had died in the war, and around 22 million soldiers died in the conflict in the battlefields. And millions more were injured in the war, both civilians and soldiers. And not only that, but many around the world lost their property and homes due to the bombings made by both the Allies and the Axis powers. Many people at the time of World War II had lost their homes, families, property, and lives. And people from that time period are still recovering from it and its consequences. And the aftermath of the war would lead to two big things. One would be the spread of communism in Eastern Europe before finally settling in China. And the second, more important aftermath part is the standoff between the US and the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And so the Cold War also would include the Vietnam War, which would lead to a whole nother topic to talk about, but not today. And well, the Cold War had a lot of implications for our everyday lives, and it had a huge impact on us. And World War II itself had a huge impact on the world. And since it led to the Cold War, which would lead to the numerous inventions and innovations that we use in our everyday lives, like phones and radio technology and all that. And well, many things would result from World War II, but in the end, it all led us to where we are now and what we do today. And honestly, what we do today would be very different from what we would have been doing had Germany won World War II. If they won World War II, who knows where it would be right now. But they didn't, so yeah. And so this is a picture of Americans celebrating the end of World War II and the victory of the Allies. And this is my bibliography. Yep. Okay. Yep. Thanks for listening, guys.
Nice. Very good on it. Ramna and I are experts now.
No, it's very impressive. I mean,
Very impressive. Yeah,
the command that the Kanna and Anand have on the subject matter is
yeah,
just amazing.
I
It's
know.
amazing. It's just amazing. So Anand, I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked Kanna. Like, is this one of your passions, world wars, or are you just interested in history in general? I mean, do you guys read about this in your schools?
Yeah, I read about it in my school. Yeah, since I took world history in freshman year, yeah, I read about it and all. I mean, I definitely find the World War II a lot more interesting than most other topics in history.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, other than the Cold War and Vietnam War, yeah, I'd say World War II is up there too, as
Nice.
well.
Yeah. Do you know do you know much about India's involvement in World War II?
Well, I mean, like, I know that I don't really know. I know that they were dealing with Great Britain at the time.
Yeah, so there were two sections of Indian troops. Actually, one the fish they were there was a portion of Indian sepoys who fought along with Britain as part of Britain Army, and there was also this opposing Indian army, which was called as Indian National Army, which was headed by this guy you probably know, Subhash Chandra Bose,
Mm.
and he basically allied with Germany. So in fact, he met with Hitler. He wanted to fight along with Hitler because his priority was to get British out of India, and he could not really get along with the other camp, which is the Gandhi and the Nehrus, because they wanted to do it all using non-violent means. Because he believed that doing trying to get British out of India through non-violent means is not going to work because they've already been in India for 300 years and we couldn't do much. So his approach was, okay, I'm going to lie. It has to be dealt with violence, and he really wanted to fight the British using the conventional warfare, and he allied with the Germans. And it's too. I mean, it's good that actually didn't work out, but it's just that there are two sections of Indian armies fighting for two different parties in World War II. It's very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Anand, the bombing of Japan bombing Pearl Harbor, was that a mistake or did they really mean to do that?
Yeah, I do think they really actually mean to do that. I mean, I don't think they would have just sent like 360 aircrafts into a major U.S. base and not expect
The
to.
reason they bombed Pearl Harbor is because if they wanted to gain a sphere of influence in like Indonesia and most of Southeastern Asia, they'd have to do a lot of naval combat. And so if America entered the war, their naval the naval force was very powerful, and Japan would get crushed by that. So they had to like find a way to destroy America's naval base. Like so, Pearl Harbor, the closest one
So
to
that's why they attacked Pearl Harbor.
attacking all of these island countries.
Oh.
Yeah.
They were also kind of angry about the trade and sanctions that U.S. had put. So yeah, that too. But I mean, yeah.
It was a deliberate move, right, from Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, Japan purposely attacked Pearl Harbor. So.
Yeah. Do you know much about the Manhattan Project?
The Manhattan Project, it was made by the famous physicist chemist Bohr. You know Bohr,
Yeah.
the one who like discovered the bonds between atoms. Yeah, he was also one of the scientists who worked in the Manhattan Project about the atoms. Well, he definitely. I mean, I don't know about that, but he was definitely like. I know he said like we should be careful about the atomic energy that this bomb can produce and all of its devastating powers.
Yeah.
Nice.
So one other question I have for you is, you said that after the war, Germany was divided or at least ruled by all the allies, like they were divided into.
Yeah, they were divided. The allies each had separate control over each
Right.
section of Germany.
So what does that mean? Does that mean the allies would administer those regions?
I mean, like I think it was just like supervising them to make sure they didn't get out of control again. That they each had their own sanctions and made sure that they didn't that German didn't try to pull any like stunts or anything.
Yeah, but Russia completely disobeyed that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, it's really amazing that you guys are really into this. This is very impressive.
Yeah, they both are like deep into
Right.
it.
Yeah, which is very good. You know that it's very good.